but drinking that shit and probably drinking that too, I'd be in the mood to get in a fight too.
Yeah.
Put on Party Up.
Yeah. Like, I don't even know which teams are playing. But as soon as somebody say fight, I'm like, yeah! And so we were talking about Oktoberfest, and so they show a picture of like this lady with all these these cups. And so I'm like, well, what do you do when you get through with a cup? They're like, just put it down or throw it away. Like, it's not a big deal. They're just gonna bring you another one. I'm like, that's wasteful. Just fill mine back up. Like, why do I here? I'll keep it on my hand.
You know what it is though? Like when you go to like a Texas Roadhouse and you're throwing peanut shells on the floor, it's like that with beer glasses at Oktoberfest.
Yeah, see, I need to be part of that.
Let's go.
I was like, hey, watch out. It's awesome. Look, I don't know. It was delicious. We're going back. We're gonna go hang out there and have some delicious beer again.
Absolutely.
And I'm not gonna drive home. So
designated drivers.
Let's roll right into it, bro. So, like, look, I have been noticing, and you've been doing a lot of work and presenting a view about adoption that a lot of people really have no clue about, and a lot of us who have no clue about adoption, period. But, you know, looking at this picture of this lovely stock family, you know, we do notice that there is a small Asian girl in the middle. You know, and this is kind of the interesting thing about adoption that I've learned from watching people in Hollywood, that white people like to adopt minorities.
And I'm just nodding. Mm-hmm.
And
Woody Allen, Mia Farrow, you know.
Yeah, Angelina Jolie, like, you know, and there's talk, you know, they called them black diamonds before and all of that, but you know, you hear about that, but you never really get the insight from, this is probably one of the best songs Outkast ever did, called Wheels of Steel.
The Wheels of Steel.
But you never really get the insight from someone who's actually lived it, you know, and you've been sharing with the world a lot of information about your growing up and how you feel about it and things like that. So, you know, let's start off with it. Like, tell us about your experience with adoption.
Yeah. So I guess I can sort of set the stage with people's general sorts of expectations of what adoption's all about, what the intentions are, and people's general sort of popular perception of it. And I mean, in my case, it's international adoption. In the case of the stock photo, international adoption. We're talking about Americans, Europeans, usually white people, 99% of the time white people, adopting kids from East Asia, South America, Africa, Haiti, places like that. People of color at the end of the day. And I guess for each person that has some sort of, I guess, general or high level story, you can say is like, hey, they came from these circumstances that were poor and unfortunate, from this place that's uncivilized, third world country. And we have some sort of case study in, like, you know, hey, they have parents now, they live in a house, they're going to school, and like, hey, they have this brand new life in America. Isn't that great? And wait, yeah, isn't that great?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's one of those things where there is the general intention of adoption, which is, hey, let's try and give these kids who are from unstable circumstances a normative life, right? Mm-hmm. And I totally respect that. I love when any sort of project starts with a good intention. That's where all successful projects start from. Is some sort of intention that has, like, wants to do some sort of good in the world. So I get that. But, you know, I guess there's the notion of two Americas, right? Like, I guess in particular, the notion of there being like a white America and a black America. And I think if I were to sum up in the most direct terms that I could, the difference between white America and black America is that white America deals in terms of ideals, intentions. Like, what's the best case scenario for like what our ideas can bring about? And not paying too much attention to what kinds of possible damage or impacts those things could have, and only focusing on the good. The problem is when there are people in power making decisions on behalf of everyone else, especially people that look different, coming from different backgrounds and different cultures. There are people that have to live with the reality and the consequences of those decisions and those policies. And in the case of my life, like, I should preface everything by saying that, like, right now, like, this is probably the highest my self-esteem and my feeling of certainty and like feeling authoritative I've ever felt in my entire life. But, you know, I'm like 120 pounds. I'm an Asian man in America, you know, in the time of Asian hate, in the time of the China virus.
Yep.
You know, so it's like, I think a lot of people that would only see adoption as this purely good and purely net positive sort of effort are coming from perspective of never having been like in a marginalized position or in some sort of place where they feel powerless in some way, because it's up to like the decisions of other people that determine what's going to happen to you. So in my case, I guess the way that I could sum it up is like, I feel emotionally healthy. I feel great. And like, in my case, the parenting that I had allowed me to become like a confident, emotionally well-adjusted adult. But, you know, I also do a lot of volunteering with adopted people, and sort of helping young people out, mentoring them and things like that. And I think what it really comes down to is like, and this was the case for me earlier in like my childhood and my teenage years, is that like when your expectations are set really high of what America's all about, Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal. And then, you know, at the same time with my experiences, all men are created equal. Like, I'm thinking to Guru on Conspiracy from Gangstar, like, all men are created equal. That's just a lie that we're telling people. Yep. You know, it's just like, it's something that informs like documents from the historical past. But what are we doing now? And like, what kinds of sins are we like allowing to happen in our society? And like, I don't want to come off as this like angry adopted person that feels really negative with this chip in my shoulder. The way I see it is I'm inspired by, in particular, Black activism by people like Malcolm X, people like Franz Fanon, like fucking egghead shit. Like, that's my background in college, just like anthropological stuff and anti-colonial study. So I guess when it comes to my perspective on adoption and sort of any sort of thing you could interpret as being negative about it, is from an anti-colonial perspective, informed by history and informed by the sorts of terrible things we've excused in the name of colonial efforts. And, you know, that's speaking in egghead terms, but I guess the way that I could put it is like, we got to stop thinking in good intentions when like someone like me in a place that like, you know, voted a majority Reagan and turned like the county around from being historically democratic, you know, unionized auto workers into voters of Reagan on a cultural basis. That sort of shows where I was coming from. And so, you know, being the only person that looked like me, shit, I got that ass whooped every day.
So it wasn't any fun. And see, that's kind of, I'm glad you are starting to dive into that part about it, because I think that's the part that people don't really pay attention to, because especially like someone from me, you're like, oh, well, you know, and this is just being real about Black kids from other sides of town. You're like, oh, well, you know, little Asian kids with a white family, everything's great. He's got everything that he, you know, there's a lot of things. That's the view of America. Like, oh, he's with a white family. You know, everything in the white family is always okay. You know, and that's the fucked up view of America that they give us. And so, you know, now you're saying,
benefit, you know, of the doubt.
Yeah, and so now you're diving into the part about growing up, and I apologize for interjecting there, but go ahead. You got that ass whooped every day.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where it's like, I am an interesting case study, and like, it's rare that you find someone that like got their ass whooped every day, but also had a good support system. So it's just like, the ass whoopings really happened like when I first started leaving the home, because that's when you realize there's a gap between the ideals that your parents talk to you about. Like, yeah, you know, everyone should love you like the way we do. And then, you know, you realize that like racism doesn't function on the basis of like how you feel about yourself.
Nope.
It functions on the basis of like the consensus of other people.
100%, bro. And growing up in DeSoto in the 80s when it was 90% white, you know.
Okay, yep.
As a
during the Reagan
boy.
years.
Oh yeah, man. You know, it was nothing to be called, you know, nigger by some kids or something when we're walking home, bro. You're talking about 5 or 6 year old kids, man.
Exactly.
Me and my buddy were talking about a common occurrence that happened over there. So there used to be this guy that would drive around in like an old Dodge van. He was a high school kid or something, but he always would be playing country music, and he'd be calling kids nigger and trying to kidnap them and put them in his van. Bro, but this is 1987. Do they care about the black kid out there? You know, hey, well, you know, you should just, you know, just keep yourself inside, you know, and don't be kidnapped. Like that was all the advice.
That's the thing, right? The goalposts are always moving. Like you could have always been doing something to keep yourself safer. And when you do the thing that was supposed to keep you safer, they were like, well, damn, you should have done the step further than that.
Yeah, you should have. It's
always moving.
Why'd you come out the house today? Didn't you know the sun was out? That's bad.
The sun's out. Other people are out. They're moving around. You don't know what's going to happen. Shit,
it's all white people kidnap black people when the sun is out. You don't want to do that. Like, go back inside, the kid. Like,
if the risk is non-zero, it's a risk. I got you.
Yeah. So growing up in an area, bro, where you're different is...
And I mean,
rough.
I was, and you know, the thing about racism too is obviously like the stereotypes differ from people to people, and like for me, right? Obviously, I'm not going to be perceived as like this threatening person that's going to like whoop people's asses or steal their stuff or do devious shit. It was just, and you know, real talk. Like it's basically like I can walk in a room and be like, "Hey guys, what's up?" and be like, "Yo, what up, chink? Fucking bitch." And it's with just that sort of energy, you know.
But then, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, just being like a smaller dude. Like, and here's the thing about my look is that like I lean into looking East Asian and like, you know, looking at the Korean styles, looking at the Japanese styles. I lean into that because I realize that, you know, people out there like adopt these styles that make themselves look good. I realize that, like, you know, a lot of Asians in America don't look good because there's no models out there to show them what looks good, you know? So it's just like people tend to interpret me as being this fucking like foreign guy. And it's just like, you don't even fucking know who I am. And I don't even mean like important. I just mean like, you don't even know what I've seen. I'm like fucking Roy Batty and Blade Runner. Like talking about like I've been seeing the sea beams off of the belt of Orion and shit.
Yeah, and these people are like, well, I don't know
trying
what
to size me up, and it's just like, no, I listen to too much DMX and Limp Bizkit to be fucking taking shit from someone like you.
Yeah, as part of like, look, you're part of that generation, bro. We're on the tail end of Generation X. We watched those people be rebellious growing up, just rebellious without any type of direction, and we're going, you know what? We're going to be rebellious, but we're going to have a little direction. And, you know, that was exactly what it was. You know, it was like watching someone storm the castle and they completely tried and fucked it all up, but didn't really get it. And then you go, you know what? We should have used fire first. And so that's exactly what we did as millennials. Came through that thing. And now Generation X gets paid time off. So you're welcome.
No, exactly. And, you know, for me, the artist that got really big right as I was going into middle school and, you know, being from Michigan, fucking Eminem.
Man.
Number one on TRL was the real Slim Shady, being a fucking obnoxious motherfucker, you know, saying the wildest shit. And
he's the greatest, bro. I've said it before.
It was a really interesting time in music too, because, you know, Dre was coming back in 99. DMX had like his third album out. So it was a really good, interesting time. And every single one of those artists from that time was talking all kinds of wild shit. that I think protected me. You know, because like you're not going to hear the kind of shit that's going to serve your self-preservation as a person of color from like the classroom. They're going to be like, hey guys, let's play this VHS on conflict resolution. And it's just like, no, fuck that shit. That's not how it works in real life. That's how you get your fucking ass whooped. Tell me the real shit. And then DMX is like, suck my dick. And I'm just like, yes, thank you.
You know,
I have the words that I need. I got you stuck off the realness, you know, like we be the infamous, you heard of us, you know, like it's energy that I harness to be like, hey, you know, I might not be carrying, but I'm mentally carrying, you know.
Look, you have to be mentally carrying, bro. When you're a person of color in America, you have to be mentally carrying, bro, because the pure, you know, this is the amazing thing. They're always talking about people of color, but if you look at the statistics of how many white people are in this country, there's so many more of them than there are of minorities and people of color. And so I keep wondering, why do I watch the news and all I see on there is crimes committed by minorities and people of color? You mean all night long, no white people committed any crimes that we need to be aware of?
And that really brings up an interesting thing. And, you know, this is kind of going off on different topics. I don't know if we got a time limit. I don't know if we're going to be entertaining people all night with this premium content. So, yeah, but, you know, really, I think that, like, it speaks to, like, what is crime? You know, not to get too academic and egghead and shit, right? But, you know, just watching something like The Wire, it's like you think about, like, the kinds of crimes that people get locked up for basically no reason, you know, like minor drug possession, stuff like that, things that are not hurting a community beyond like the idea of like the like purity of the community sort of shit, like theoretical stuff. And then like you think of like the kind of fucked up shit that's going on in the average suburb, like kids being bad touched and stuff that you hear about like years later. It's just like, what's the real crime? What's causing the real trauma? What's causing the real harm that people need to go to therapy for? Is it like the young single mother that's like, oh shit, like I don't have like any family support, I don't have a husband, I gotta do something, and then gets in trouble for a petty drug crime versus like, you know, like the fucking asshole guy that like no one likes that like works at the middle school that's the neighborhood pedo, you know.
Bro,
so
and that is so true, bro. And it goes unknown and unspoken all the time. And it's just like the and it's sad because the person that's selling the weed or doing the small petty crime is probably smoking that to cope with something else that they've dealt with in their life, or maybe being adopted and not having the ability or the resources to connect with people like yourself, and you know, be mentored to. So tell us a little bit about like the mentorship, like what goes on there, like how do you mentor someone that was adopted as from where you are today?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, like I attended summer camps for like adopted kids from similar backgrounds. And that's sort of how I got into like activities where like that sort of mentoring happens, and just seeing what kind of difference it made for me. And in particular, that feeling of self-love that, you know, I feel like every kid needs if they feel different. Like it put me in a place where I was like, you know, if I was able to gain that, and I was, and I'll put it in these terms too, if I was able to be one of the ones that survived, because the suicide rate and suicide attempt rate among people that are adopted, just in general, both internationally and domestically, is 4 times the average.
Really?
Yes, 4 times the average.
See, I didn't know that. Nobody knows that, bro. Like you just, it's just like nobody knows that. I'm gonna shut up. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. But like it speaks to this notion, right, that adoption in the minds of a majority of people, and you know, not to say that this is wrong, you know, what usually happens is we fill in the gaps in our knowledge with just like what's sort of like the popular opinion. And the popular opinion is that like, hey, since the intentions of the institution are good, hey, they must be doing good, so it's a good thing. I don't even need to think about it, whatever, I don't give a fuck. But I mean, for someone like me and for a lot of people that have been through this, I mean, if you really think about how adoption is talked about just on an everyday basis, it's a joke. It's something that people joke about. And it doesn't really offend me because I understand why it's a joke. And it kind of speaks to how unusual the circumstance is, too. I mean, really, in my heart of hearts, like in my most rational, honest look at real life in society, this shit is weird. Like, of course, people are gonna like look at me in a photo with my two white parents. My dad passed away, so it's me and my mom now. Rest in peace. I understand that it's weird, and I'm not gonna try and justify it and be like, just because that's what I'm used to, that it's not unusual for everyone else. That's an unreasonable expectation. But you know, it's one of those things where it's like, given that unique sort of experience, but also coming from like a supportive family. And I guess that's like a whole other tangent I could go on real quick. Just like, for me, I've had to mention several times that my adoption experience was good, in the sense that I would say a majority of adoptions, or a majority of adoptees or adopted people that share their opinion on the internet is about trauma and terrible stuff and feeling abandoned and all this stuff. Like the worst sort of like PTSD related emotional trauma that you can experience for various reasons. Kind of just speaking to the general perception of like how seriously people take adoption, but also from the perspective of like, if you are an orphan, if you're a foster child, if you are like, you know, one of society's forgotten, like you could be having all kinds of terrible shit happening to you, whether it be sexual assault stuff, physical abuse stuff, emotional abuse stuff. And you don't really have anyone to talk to about that. And like, if this is the only setting that you've been exposed to, then like you may not even be able to perceive for yourself that's abnormal and that's toxic and wrong. So I think that's why a lot of adoptees end up having mental issues and needing treatment for it, is because a lot of them are coming from homes that are either abusive, or it's just like these mental illnesses manifest because the parents have a different understanding of how reality operates than what their kids experience. And they think that just because their individual experiences don't show this hostile world, that the world couldn't possibly be hostile to their kids too. And that sort of lack of honesty in how hostile reality can be is what tends to be the source of why a lot of these adopted people's mental health spirals out of control.
Jeez.
So it can be heavy shit. And you know, for me, it's just like, yo, my life is good. Got a good wife, you know, one of the few lucky people to have a home. But at the same time, it's like, I didn't fucking go through all that racism and like all of the gaslighting of people saying, oh, they have good intentions, but it's really not that bad. And then all the sorts of things that I had to reflect on. And then, you know, after high school and, you know, being exposed to like Black authors and seeing how the struggle for Black liberation at large is very deeply connected to the institutions and attitudes that created adoption, or international adoption, in the first place. Like, did you know it was created by just like an evangelical couple in the 1950s who were like, yo, Congress, we're like this nice evangelical couple from Oregon. Can we please adopt these children from Korea? Can we have this special session of Congress to get this set up? And Congress was like, yeah, sure. And a point I like to bring up whenever I discuss this shit, right? And I think this is really a very reasonable view to have, is like, I think about it just as an example, as a counter case study. You wouldn't fucking see a Black congregation do this shit. No. Because the first thing they would say to themselves is like, that's none of my business.
Yeah.
You know, like it's the cultural notion of staying in your lane. Stay in your damn lane.
Yeah.
None of your business. Because if you end up putting your nose in places where you have no business, like, you're going to make trouble for other people. That's just like the most elementary you can break it down. And it speaks to just like the kind of wacky shit that people can get away with if, you know, they look like the type of people that would have credibility, even if no one checks their credentials.
Pull the old Jesus card on them.
And what's funny to me is someone that's deeply sort of involved in this, and I have like sort of a dark sense of humor. But you know, it's really a serious thing for people that are just kind of newly like introduced to this stuff. Is like, yo, they adopted all these Korean kids, like this particular couple, the Holt family, and like I think I know at least one of their sons committed suicide or died by suicide, and I think more did too.
Wow.
So I mean, it speaks to the gap between what their intentions are and like how reality treated them and like what kinds of worldly understanding like their local communities had of just like these people as human beings. You know, these are just like Korean kids coming over, and everyone's like, "What the fuck is this? Are you from China?" And it's just like, you know, on one hand, like, of course, like, you know, like there's been one Chinese restaurant, like, you know, 5 miles away for the last 20 years, but those are the only Asian people they've ever seen. So, of course, they don't fucking know anything.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's fine. I mean, you know, in a vacuum, that's not hurting anyone. But when it comes down to, hey, you're bringing kids there into that environment and you expect them to be mentally healthy and like, you know, get married and have kids and have a nice job. Good fucking luck.
Dang, that's a struggle, bro. That's an up. Yeah, welcome to the uphill climb of the people of color.
Exactly. That's why I feel solidarity with all people of color and workers of the world, man. Because regardless of my own successes, I've realized that a majority of like the struggles I've had have come to terms with like I need to be happy with myself regardless of other people's perceptions of me.
Fact.
And I feel like I've learned that best from rappers, man. Being able to model that sort of confidence in spite of people being haters, people being unreasonable, you know? You realize that at the end of the day, it's always going to be like that. So what are you going to do in the face of that? Are you going to collapse and just let that happen? Or are you going to push forward and do what you need to do? So
that's it. Nobody's going to sit there and you don't want to be no bitch.
Yeah.
As they say, you don't want to be no bitch. So as you see, it's the end of the country. This is the Pacific Ocean. And that means that the show has reached its end for today, man. Look, what would you tell people? Because if you're like me and you're watching this show, you're here and you've learned so much more about adoption from people of color. But what, with you, someone that has lived through this, what advice would you give people that have not lived through it or don't really know your story, and now that they know that one of their friends might have lived through that, like what can they do to be supportive of? How would you want to for them to interact, or how do you be supportive of some shit like that? You know?
See, that's a great question. Yeah. That's a great question because, like, to be honest, I have to detach from a good amount of like what's considered to be the adoptee community online. In the sense that like there is a lot of, I guess I would call it like trauma bonding. And I don't think that's a healthy, sustainable sort of way to start and inform a relationship. Like, hey, we all share the same trauma. Let's bond together over it. And I'm just like, I'm trying to reduce the amount of problems in my life. You know, I respect them as human beings, respect their human dignity and all that. But I need space from that. I dealt with all kinds of wacky shit like that my whole life. I'm not trying to get more of it. But when it comes down to, I think someone like me who is sort of like on a journey with it, has aspirations of fully defining themselves as an individual and as a person, after experiencing like people telling you what you should be or how you should feel, you know, that you should feel thankful that you've been adopted, and in a very sort of condescending and racist way, like, we saved you from this third world place, and, you know, we saved you from heathenism type shit. And, you know, that's not the attitude of everyone, but that's the general sort of attitude that informs the institution and informs a lot of people who do it. And it's coming from a place of ignorance rather than a place of worldliness. Because if it was coming from a place of worldliness and coming from a place of true compassion, they'd be saying, yo, what the fuck are we like adopting these babies out for? Shouldn't we be giving these families more money so they can keep the damn kids? So
look, and on that note, I am T.O. Pockets, along with the homie Kyle. This has been an interesting ride down the adoption. I say rabbit hole. It's just like I said, like, it's not all Punky Brewster, ladies and gentlemen. It's not all Punky Brewster. But I want to invite you back next show which it's gonna be another. No, usually the show's on Wednesday, but look, I'm gonna tell you straight up what happened yesterday. I was asking you if you wanted to be on the show. I
Yeah.
thought it was Tuesday. I thought it was Tuesday, and so my girlfriend was like, "Well, aren't you and Kyle doing the show tonight?" I was like, "No, it's tomorrow." She goes, "No, tonight's Wednesday." I was like, "No," and she's like, "Yes." And I looked at the calendar. I was like, "Oh, well, no, we're doing it on Thursday."
I guess we're doing it on Thursday now.
I don't even know. I lost Monday. I got to figure out. It's the second time I've lost.
Hey, I can relate. It's either like a day I wake up for work or it's not. So
yeah, I don't know. It's a day. But look, I've enjoyed being here with my friend. I appreciate you letting us in on some insight from your life and sharing with everybody. And I want to let everybody know watching. Thank you. I appreciate you for watching. You got any shout outs you want to give, Kyle?
Shout out to my mom. She's at Harbor Chase. Love her to death.
Shout out, Mom.
Shout out to Eminem, who helped raise me and protect me from bullies growing up. Same thing with DMX. Shout out to my block 23 and Romeo. Appreciate you. And fuck my high school. You treated me like shit, but here I am. Fuck you, Dakota. Thank you.
Told you. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we are out. See you later.
Peace.
Why is that not working? It's supposed to run.